Hello, everybody, and welcome to the State of Craft. We are here on episode number 32, getting into the numbers of the excise duty program and how it affects a couple different processors who have been lovely enough to be here with us today. Before we get into that, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping here. Thank you guys for being here. It's incredible. We already have 17, people, 18 people, and we haven't barely even begun here. As you guys know, the State of Craft is a bi-weekly podcast on the state of the legal craft cannabis industry. We bring in guests that I respect and like in the industry and want to hear their perspectives and learn from them. And today we've got one guest we've had before, and Janeen, and a couple of guests we haven't had yet, and Brishna and Daniel. And I'll introduce them all in a bit here. The State of Craft is hosted by myself, Sammy. I'm the CEO of Certicraft, and we are on a mission to help small to medium businesses transition into and thrive in the regulated market. And we do it primarily today through both policy advocacy work, media stuff like this, and through Certicraft itself, which is a compliance platform that makes your relationship with the government very easy. Our missions in that context is to save you as much time as possible with your daily tracking of work and generating reports for you, making audits take literally a minute, so on and so forth. Few housekeeping things before getting into land acknowledgement and then into introducing our guests. For those of you who haven't been here before, we have a dedicated chat section. Would love to have some interactions there. Say hi and comment and react, all that good stuff. Hi, Earl. Thanks for jumping on real quick there. Earl Oliver was a guest in the early days, number like 12, I would guess, something like that. Great discussion with him. For those of you who want to go back to the archives. Spelled cha, though. It should be archives. English. What a language. And if you have any questions, though, if something comes up and you want to actually get an answer from one of the guests or from myself, we do have a separate questions tab. So go in there, ask your questions there. You can upvote the questions that you like, and at the end we'll go through in order of most upvoted. So I live in Nelson, British Columbia. And I was here for a few years, and I was pretty confused because I never really saw Indigenous people here. And I spent a few years kind of asking, why don't I see Indigenous people? Why isn't there Indigenous presence here? And after a couple years of being here, I finally met somebody who had an answer for me. She worked with one of the Sinixt elders here in the area, and her answer was pretty simple. That's pretty much genocide. There was a scalping program. There was a lot of murder, essentially, that took a population of thousands down to literally less than 10. And that is why in this area, I haven't really gotten to interact much with Indigenous people compared to previous areas in BC that I've lived in. And this area is the traditional unceded territories of the Sinixt people through intermarriage, the Tanaha people, excuse me. And I think wherever you are in Canada, it's really critical that you, at the very least, have an understanding of the First Peoples of the land that you're on. I think any meaningful reconciliation starts with that. And without actually having a sense of the history there, we're never going to get anywhere. And things are shifting in Canada. It's been cool to come to a country where there's a lot of focus on reconciliation. I do see a lot of it as just lip service and not actual meaningful work, but there is also an increasing amount of meaningful work that I'm seeing in various industries and capacities, and that makes me really hopeful as somebody who came from a place where there is continued attempt at cultural genocide and there is no work whatsoever, superficial or meaningful. So Anyway, let's shift into from one depressing topic to another depressing topic. This one being the financial unsustainability of the cannabis industry. Made you laugh, Brishna.
Well, Sammy, we have a story that maybe we'll share another time. But our farm's in Lillooet, and this is unceded lands of the Statlium. We're actually here in Pemberton today on the Lillooet Nation's lands. But that where our farm is in Lillooet is actually one of the most southern communities in North America that's majority Indigenous. So they had their genocide era very early on with the gold rush. In the 1860s, when Lillooet was at one time the most populous town or city north of San Francisco and west of Chicago. And so there was, the continued extermination of people here in allowing the gold rush to happen. And so there's this connection between the resource extraction here in BC and the subjugation of the Indigenous communities. And we really see, organic cannabis as a way to provide a sustainable economic future in these areas. So our farms in Lillooet, it's been thought to be continuously inhabited for the last 9,000 years, one of the longest inhabited places on Earth, because the salmon come back every year. The traders came and were like, you guys want to come hunt and trap for us? And they're like, no, the salmon swim up the stream every year. We just pull them out. You want to buy some salmon? And then we went and built a dam in the 1950s to provide electricity for Vancouver, and that dam completely took away one of the largest salmon runs for the people here. So the progress of our civilization has been that. And so we called our first product Lillooet Gold, because the story of the gold rush in Lillooet is really the story of the start of BC and all of this history. So I have a story we're going to publish on that, but it'll be an interesting time. But right now we're talking about the gold that we're not getting and the government is keeping.
Yep. That's interesting. I'm glad you mentioned the ties to resource extraction, because Nelson's also in the time those programs ran here and that there was this extermination of people here, there was Nelson was also one of the hot centers for resource extraction. In fact, Nelson was being considered as a potential capital for BC before they decided to have it be Victoria, so it was as far south as possible so the US couldn't claim the island for themselves. But yeah, I'm going to be looking into that and kind of seeing the correlation between the two for my own purposes. But yeah, I don't want to talk about that for too long, because that's not the point of this year today, though it is very important. What we are going to shift gears into is introductions. And Daniel, since you've already chimed in, why don't we start with you? Do you want to say a little bit about both yourself personally and your company?
Thanks, everybody. My name is Daniel Lantela. I'm founder of Whistler Technologies and co-founder of Whistler Therapeutics with Brishna. I come from an academic research background, but have been using cannabis for a long time. And so both Brishna and I came from a scientific background, and I got really interested in the use of cannabis for cancer and just the medical properties of the plant. And I started working at Whistler Medical Marijuana Corporation in 2014 in October there, and Brishna started there shortly after. So one of the first 10 licensees in Canada in the medical program, and started there to start their oil and extraction setup. And that was before we were even allowed to extract, and we were trying to get a research license. And then we had the laws that allowed extracts to be sold to medical patients, and we started making solventless extracts into oil. So we made bubble hash, put that into an edible oil. That went really well with the patients, and we wanted to scale up the process. So we started making some equipment to do it, and that really brought together Whistler Technologies. So we sell solventless extraction equipment now, kind of aimed at medium to large scale companies, and kind of sanitary requirements on that side. And then after Brishna and I also started Whistler Therapeutics to grow outdoors and make solventless extracts. So I'll let her give the introduction next.
Brishna, do you want to?
Sure. Thank you, Daniel. Whistler Therapeutics was born right after the sale of Whistler Medical Marijuana Corporation to Aurora. It got incorporated pretty quickly. Things got running up pretty quickly. It all feels very quick, but it has taken us about 4 years, if not more, to get where we are and have products on the market. So as a standard cultivator, we have a farm in Lillooet, which is an outdoor farm. It's about 10 acres. The past 3 summers, we've been able to grow about 2.48 to, I would say, 3 acres each. That's been per year. We have a quite small team, which means we don't grow very much. So we classify and fall under the craft designation for the DD program in BC, as well as a few other programs. And we keep everything fresh frozen, really, for solventless extraction. And that's the beauty of outdoor cultivation, is it's once you get your processes dialed in, the sun does a lot of the work for you. We're in an unbelievable geography. Lillooet gets a lot of sunshine, and the temperatures are quite high too. And the humidity is perfect for growing outdoors. So we haven't had mold issues or any other heavy metals, anything else in our plants, in our biomass. But essentially, Whistler Therapeutics is a cultivator and processor. So we process our own biomass within another facility. It's called Apothecary Botanicals. We have a close relationship with them. And we've been trying to raise capital for the past 2 years to get our own sales license. So we currently use Apothecary sales license to distribute our products nationally. We're in different provinces as far as PEI through medical channels and redistributors. And we're trying to really bring in quality products at fair market prices, sun-grown, of course, and organic biomass. Our extracts right now are solventless concentrates, aren't organic certified, mainly because we do our sales to another party. And in order for us to get our organic certification or organic certified label, we would have to get their entire facility organic certified. And that's not really in our business plan currently. So we're just focused on our own sales, marketing, trying to grow our revenue in the hopes that we can actually sustain our operations and hopefully be able to put some money towards research. Like Dan mentioned, we're both researchers by training. So our goals are to get a medical claim on one of our oil products. And really that's how it all started, was due to quality assurance surveys we were doing on patient basis on our oils we were releasing under Whistler Medical sales license back from 2016 onwards. So it's been a few years. We do have a large data collection on patient perception of different terps and different combinations of cannabinoids in an oil form.
Awesome.
Really, that's sort of our guide. Yeah. I'm going to let Janeen go because I can go for a while.
Well, before Janeen goes, I'll say thank you. And I'll just give a shout out to your Acapulco Gold that Nick says is fire in the chat. Janeen, take it away.
Hi, guys. Janeen Davis. I'm VP of Sales at Joint Venture Craft Cannabis. We are a small craft processor working with mostly small craft suppliers out of BC. And we have basically just tried to focus on legacy transitioned producers. We're all legacy ourselves. I have 20 years experience in the industry. My entire team is all female legacy. I think just between 3 of us, we have nearly 75 years of experience on our sales team. So we really have focused on trying to get legacy producers into the legal market and take them to market. And it has been a hard road. This year in particular, we've seen a ton of pricing compression, and I'd say there's similar struggles on the other side. Being in Nelson, Sammy, that Nelson has a very, very strong cultivation here where I live. So you really do get insight into both sides of the market because the other side of the market was so strong here. So, we're just seeing kind of like an oversupply of craft flower right now. On both sides of the market. And when you have massive supply, what happens to pricing? Compression. So the excise.
Do you think it's an oversupply, or do you think it's a matter of distribution not being in place to support the supply?
I'm going to say oversupply based on how fast units are moving out of the central delivery DCs. there's a lot of people who all think their weed is premium and want to get a premium price for it, but premium flower really represents like 3% of what people buy.
Okay. Sorry,
So-
sorry to interrupt. Was there more you wanted to say, Janine? I know I kind of interrupted
yeah, so
your
we
intro
have
there.
we have the brands BC Black that we put a lot of our premium producers in. We're now really excited to be launching cultivator brands. We started with Stone Grove, and you know, Scott Rutledge, he's from Golden. He's been producing, you know, for a very long time. He's salt of the earth. He's just the kind of guy you'd want to get to know, hang out with, go snowboarding with. He's really incredible. And to get him in BC Black and now to get to launch his brand on the BC market, it's just been so meaningful to me. So you're going to start to see more of our cultivator brands launching. We have Living Cannabis, an LSO cultivator out of Armstrong. They're launching as well. Their Lemon Sugar Kush is getting rave reviews. Scott's Bizquick is getting rave reviews. So, you know, we're starting to bring everybody out into their own brand and to truly get them the recognition they deserve.
Cool. And I think Scott's actually in the audience
Oh,
here.
is
So yeah, Brishna Janeen definitely is a hustler. I have learned that in our time working together. Cool. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you being here. And for our audience, kind of the way that this particular event was curated was you know, I reached out to Brishna and Daniel because I've been getting to know them over the past like half year since the Unicorn Cup last year, where Brishna and myself were both speakers, and you know, I wanted to have a chat getting into the numbers of excise, and Brishna suggested that I bring on somebody as well who has a flower focus, because while Brishna and Daniel with Through Earthwolf Farms, they do organic outdoor growing, the biomass is really meant for the extraction. So their understanding of the world of excise is very extraction focused. So at Brishna's suggestion, I reached out to Janeen. So because Janeen I've worked with before, I like her a lot, and you know, JVCC is focused entirely on flower and pre-rolls for craft cannabis. So it felt like a good kind of yeah, just two different sides of craft cannabis and how it relates to getting screwed over by the government on a financial level. So, on that note, and I will say, I know there's a few people who are in government who are here today, so thank you for being here on this call. I hope you don't take our many quips about how much we're being screwed over too personally, but I mean, fact of the matter is people are getting fucked right now. So so please excuse our bluntness that will come through often in this call here. And Brishna was not expecting that either. Twice now made you laugh out loud. See how many times I can get that tally up in this conversation here. So on the note of getting fucked over financially, like why don't we dive into it? I don't want to get into numbers just yet. I want to kind of talk at a higher level first. You know, like bird's eye view, kind of what the temperature is like, what the feeling is like, what it's like really been like. And then once we kind of have like maybe kind of that bird's eye view of how you guys feel, and I'm going to use that word feel there, about the way that the frameworks are set up right now. And you know, the focus here is on excise, but you know, the markups and the distribution, like it all plays together. I mean, the issue at hand is that there's just an incredible amount of overtaxation right now, so it's hard to kind of like just isolate you know, excise and have that be alone. But excise is like the single biggest, or maybe not even, is excise the single biggest piece of the puzzle? I'm kind of assuming that it is, but I'm not.
It's hard to say.
Provincial distributor margin.
That's bigger than excise in your experience?
No, but they're equally weighted, and I have a piece that could show you that.
Great. Daniel, what were you about to say?
Like, excise is an easy way to fix it, but there's just problems at every single level. So, you know, how does it feel right now? Like we're, you know, getting chased by Health Canada to collect on a regulatory fee we can't pay. And it's like, you know, they're telling us to stop selling products and at the same time being like, you owe us money. And we're like, It's like there's, just feel like I don't have enough money to own a cannabis farm right now. And I think that's how a lot of people are feeling. So it's pretty tough on that side. And, being on the small side and like a family business and bootstrapped, and then seeing like $200 million losses from public companies, it's like, I think what the craft industry could have done with the investment into this industry probably would have changed things so drastically. But obviously money goes to money people, and it was spent foolishly. And so it just really hurts seeing these losses build up to be like all this potential that could have been invested into something good has not been, and then the government is just kind of like rubbing it in. So I would also say that the government in Canada, just the feeling in the US is like, we did something wrong with prohibition. Like, you went to jail for cannabis, we're going to put a social equity program in, and you're first up to legalization. In Canada, they're like, you did something wrong, fuck you didn't listen to us, you're not allowed, we're going to go talk to these other people. They were said, this is a better way to protect kids from cannabis is these regulations. They never admitted they did anything wrong. They aren't trying to right wrongs. Canada is from an authoritarian perspective. You didn't listen to us in the past, you're a bad person, you're not allowed into this industry.
And it goes beyond that too. Like the entire regulatory framework on a federal level is part of the Criminal Act. Like, it's written into, we had an episode number 4, I think, with John Conroy and Jack Lloyd, 2 lawyers who've taken Health Canada to the Supreme Court and won. Actually, I know John Conroy did. I'm not sure if Jack Lloyd was involved with those cases. But John Conroy gave us like a 15-minute like overview of how fucked the Cannabis Act is on a legal level, and how it's most industries, the framework that makes them legal is a business-oriented legal framework. Cannabis isn't that. It's in a criminal framework, even though it's a legal industry. I don't remember enough about it to speak more to it than that, but go check out that episode on YouTube if you're curious. It's really eye-opening. Sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
I was just going to say that, while we think that we might be singled out in the cannabis industry, we are for a lot of things. For this like criminality thing, it's actually the same for alcohol, or quite similar. In Ontario, there's like a number of SKUs, like 10,000 products that are legal alcohol. And if your alcohol isn't one of those approved SKUs, it's not legal. So if people have like super old wine, like there's a lot of like wine collectors who have like illegal alcohol because it's not on this list of approved SKUs for products. So Canada is starting from that criminality authoritarian standpoint, and totally like cannabis isn't legal. There's a legal route for access. It's still illegal to grow cannabis if you have more than 4 plants, or, the government decides they don't like you. So, it's just like, there isn't a legal, I don't see cannabis is legal. I see there's a legal path to access cannabis and produce it, but that path has so much red tape and turnarounds that, I feel for Janeen, like trying to turn legacy growers to the legal market right now. They're just laughing at us. These times are tough for them, but just seeing the barriers, like there's a bit of both sides when I tell them like what I have to go through to get a product sold, and it's just like seen as absurd.
Yeah. Janine, you want to Brishna, go ahead.
Yeah, no, the excise tax is definitely a significant portion. To answer your question, Sammy, it is with the largest percentage is excise. Plus, to Janine's point, the margins or the markups distributors, whether provincial or private, put on top.
Yeah, and it's like, with the provincial distribution boards, like they're a monopoly. So it's like you have no choice there. It's not like there's a markup and then there's an alternative that you can take.
We pay them for a service that they can't deliver, and they have such high turnover of staff that their lack of training makes our operations a nightmare.
Yeah. That's that's something I haven't really heard before. I don't really know too much about the ins and outs. Do you want to elaborate on that at all, or is that
Sure.
as
So right now for DD, it's taken us 7 months to register one SKU of
sorry,
hash.
just to pause there. DD, direct
Is
delivery.
direct delivery.
For anybody who isn't in BC and isn't familiar with that, it's a new program that the BC Cannabis Secretariat's office basically told the BCLDB they had to undertake because there was a whole bunch of bullshit with the centralized system, and it allows anybody who produces less than 3,000 kilograms of dried flower equivalent a year to sell directly to retailers. But despite all of the services and warehousing and logistics and shipping, despite all that being now passed on to the retailers and the producers, the markup is still the same. So, of course, your costs have gone up now in this program that was deliberately I don't know what the right word is. It was deliberately
designed.
It was deliberately created. It was the Cannabis Secretariat's office told the BCLB to create this in order to enable and facilitate small scale producers to have a chance at success. So it's kind of bullshit that, like, the whole point of this this system is being thrown out the window when you're just adding costs by creating this program. Anyway,
the reasoning there, they're like, oh well, if we don't do that, you're going to sell it for lower than us. Like, you can undercut central distribution if you don't put the 15% markup. So I started calling the BC Finance Ministry today, and I recommend anybody in this industry reach out to their MLA, start calling the BC Finance Ministry, leave messages, email them, be like, why am I paying 15%? You should I can charge 15% extra so I don't undercut the BCLDB, but I should get to keep that 15%. I've got to chase down retailers, give them a product list, get a PO, give them an invoice, get it paid, get it packed, get it shipped. There's so much more work for me to do a DD order for a product that's listed in central delivery. Why would I ever deliver it? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, to add on, Sammy, you asked that you hadn't heard before the logistics and the issues within the provincial distributors themselves. There is literally one person, we're told, employed right now to register all the SKUs for a direct delivery program in BC. That's why it's taken her 7 months to register a SKU, and she even made a mistake on the wholesale price. So we had to do a price adjustment. So for us to chase one person multiple times in August to register one SKU because she's too busy and overwhelmed with all the other SKU registrations that are newer coming in is operationally and business wise makes no sense at all.
And Melissa Harris is chiming in the chat saying that she's also noticed errors when she's registering stuff. Janeen, is what Brishna's talking about here something that resonates with you with JVCC as well?
Well, it is. But what I would say is we could do a whole episode on what happened during the strike, and I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, fun. Fun is a very subjective term in this context.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
The NDP failed to negotiate the union contract for I don't know, it was expired for 6 months, and they're supposed to be the party of the unions. And then they left our industry and threw us under the bus and said, strike in alcohol and cannabis, it doesn't matter. And it literally destroyed so many retailers that are now going out of business. I know of 3 stores of a good friends that have shut down. So we could go there, but direct delivery, I was glad to have it happen. Still charging 15% when all they're doing is administrative and they only have 1 staff member. This was news to me. Doing the registrations, I think, is egregious. It is definitely an overreach, but Jeff Ring, when he did his presentation, everybody wants to hate the BCLDB. He clarified to us, this is not a fee for service. This is a fee collected and remitted to greater government. So just to echo what Brishna said and Danielle said, we need to be involving our MLA. Now, luckily in Nelson, we have Brittany Anderson and a wonderful NDP MLA who really I found out during the strike, all of you called your MLAs. The only one to really make noise was Brittany. Everybody else gave lip service. And I think what we really need to talk about with excise or any of these issues, there's so much stigma that is still existing in cannabis. And due to marketing regulations and everything else, we really haven't been able to introduce cannabis to the greater community. And, you know, like all of these are problems, but part of the reason that we're not getting traction here is there's tremendous stigma around our industry still. A lot of people still see us as criminals. A lot of people still see it as something that's not good. And a lot of people are still scared by it. And until that overarching issue is addressed, I don't think we're going to get traction on any of this. And I know that's a hard thing to say. We might get a little bit. OCS gave us a little bit back on the 3%. But the stigma is incredible. And all you need to do is go to CTV News on Twitter and see where they posted the article about excise tax. And then read, we're in echo chambers here, guys. Read the average citizen of Canada's reply to that. And it was not favorable. They do not care about the fact that so many people got into the cannabis business and are going out of business. These are the same people who ratted us out 7 years ago because they smelt something they didn't like. Okay? This is what we're up against, and we need to address that. We're in these echo chambers. We all love weed. Everybody else doesn't, and that needs to be talked about.
So to bring it back into like the actual excise and taxation side of things, because I know we could just like go on tangents and have like 4 hours of rambles here, meaningful rambles. I don't want to use rambles to mean like, you know, meaningless conversation, but there's a lot that we can talk about for sure, and all of us here are very opinionated. To bring it back to the excise, though, Janeen, can you talk to your feeling to bring it back to that as it relates to the taxation of cannabis and how it's affecting your business and your operations on an actual practical level?
For us, we knew what we were getting into, and we remit our excise bill every month, and we're not behind. And I'm blessed that we're in that position. However, what it's affecting is, you know, it's a lot of money coming off the cultivators. So, you know, there's excise, and then there's provincial excise, and there's federal excise and provincial. So, you know, I did prepare something to show the difference province to province, and I could show that now if you wanted, or later.
Yeah, I feel like this is a nice moment here to
Let's go
gears.
ahead and throw this up, and then I can just speak to it. So here we go. So what we're looking at right now is excise per province on a $39.99 SKU or $39.95 in Ontario, Alberta.
So when it's basically $40, are you talking, is that like, is $40 what the
MSRP.
consumer is paying the retailer?
Yeah, suggested. This is exactly, and there could be tax on top of that. So
it's not including sales tax.
Yeah, and not including sales tax.
Correct. Yeah.
So when we're looking at this, when we're selling into, say, BC for $24.50, you're only paying $3.50 a gram in excise.
Sorry, I'm gonna pause you there, Janine. When you say you're paying into BC for $24.50, who is paying who? What is that $24.50?
We would load it into the province at that per unit, and then there's province markup and retail markup. So is the province markup included in that $24.50? No.
So that's the price that you are getting.
Wholesale, yeah.
Okay. But it does include excise, or it does not include excise?
It includes excise. So the producer has to pay the excise into the province. So this is one thing that's fundamentally wrong in these three provinces. I'm of the belief system excise should be collected at retail and submitted at retail. I know retailers would hate that. However, what consumers truly don't understand is that we're paying the excise to the province. The province is marking up that excise 15%. And then retailers are marking up that excise 30% or more. This is in BC. I know other retailers in other provinces don't enjoy those kind of margins. So in BC, that excise, that $3.50, so you take that $3.50 of federal excise, and let's talk about what it turns into by the time a consumer goes to do that purchase. $3.50 times 1.15 for the BCLDB margin. Now it's already at $4.03 to a retailer to purchase that unit. Now, when a retailer marks it up, say they take a 30% reasonable retail margin, that excise is going to go from 403 to 575 because retailers mark it up and BCLDB marks up the excise. Okay, so that's a part that people don't really talk about, is that BCLBD and retailers, they don't just mark up the price of the product, they mark up their cost. And when their cost includes the excise, they're marking the excise up too.
And I'm seeing in here, Janeen, that on the BC side, that 350 that you've quoted, I'm assuming that very last line is the excise duty. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the excise
so
duty.
So then we're looking at Alberta, where it's 672. You're talking about there's like basically $12 or something like that has now been is entirely just excise in the markup on excise. That is really terrible.
And consumer, exactly. So then in Ontario, when you're looking at this, it's a little bit more, right? So if you're now, the difference in load in also has to do with provincial distributor margin. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not getting into that. I'm not allowed to talk about
There's
that.
an NDA in place. Janeen may not disclose what Ontario is doing, but I will say from what I've heard from a few different sources is it sounds like there's a whole bunch of shenanigans that's bullshit that should be illegal. So that's all I will say.
But I do know that, and what I can say is Ontario's really trying right now to work with craft suppliers, and they've really focused on this last year. And I know that things may still be difficult right now, but they're trying. And I appreciate the effort, and it's real people. It's not just some big scary government. There's people that work in there that care, and I connect with them, and I'm grateful for them.
But so, that might be true, and I feel that way about the BCLDB. There's a lot of people I've met in the BCLDB that are wonderful, and yet their policies could be screwing people over. So that even if people are wonderful and really trying to make things better, if those people who are trying to make things better can't actually set the policies, and the policies are set by people who are out of touch, like that, it doesn't change the harm that it does to small businesses that are just trying to survive and can't.
Yeah, so I get that. So Ontario, say we load a unit in for $21.30 to reach a $39.95 MSRP at retail. The excise on that is going to be $4.17, not $3.50. And the reason why is because they have it, when you're looking at this, there's federal excise, provincial excise, and provincial adjustment ad valorem. And so the provincial adjustment that comes in, that's the piece there that really, truly makes the excise start to get more. So now when we move on to Alberta, you can see we could load in at $25.90. And you'd think, wow, you're making more money than you are in Ontario. That's awesome, right? No, we're not. Look at that, like $6.72 in excise. So you take that $6.72 in excise and divide it by 3.5. That's $1.92 a gram. Okay, $1.92. So when you look at this, you're paying $1.92 a gram in Alberta and $1 in BC. Ouch, right? So it's just this is part of the reason that I think it's so hard to supply Alberta, not even getting into how all the stores there charge for shelf space. But, except for a few private retailers, Alberta's a tough province to be in. And this is just talking dried flower. So, go ahead, Daniel.
I just wanted to jump in here because there's an interesting analogy. So we have a product that's 30, or let's say we have a rosin product that we want to have as $39.95 on the OCS, right? And so, let's say you're selling 3.5 grams. Janine, that was a 3.5 gram in that example.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3.5 grams and is 20% THC. So you've got 700 milligrams of THC in your eighth. Okay, probably higher, but let's just say that. So my rosin's 70% THC. I've got 1 gram of rosin I'm selling. It's got 700 milligrams of THC. I get taxed at 1 cent per milligram. So I've got to pay $7 of excise tax. But no, sorry, you're right. We're paying this to Ontario. So it's $8.02. And then I've got my packaging, and I use the same Mylar with the label as an eighth, but then I've got to pay $1 for the jar and the cap inside there. So now, and then, it's the OCS. So they're like, hey, you know what? I'd like, rosin's not a high selling product. So like, send me 5 cases. I'm not going to order 20 cases a month. I'm going to order 5 cases a week, and I want you to send them on a pallet. And oh, you can't send 5 cases a week to me. Your product's out of stock, and now we don't have stock, and you didn't sell well last week, so I'm only going to order 2 cases. So you're a small producer in BC. I've told them, like, you're ordering like you want to put us out of business. Like this is like, we can't afford to fill orders to the OCS. And I'm trying to get them to work with us, and people have been receptive, but there are systems in place that are not favorable. So in that case, maybe I'm getting $10 for my gram of rosin that was sold for 21, and it's getting to the consumer for $40. And so it's like, and in the black market, that product will get wholesaled by the producer at $30. They make $30, I make 10, because of to the same consumer.
So Daniel, kind of just a point of clarification there with the example you gave of 700 milligrams of THC in a gram of rosin, same exact amount of THC as the 3.5 gram flower that Janeen is selling. Essentially what I'm hearing is, in that example, we're going from 3.5 grams of excise, should translate to $3.5 of excise duty, and in your case, the same exact amount of THC. Basically, you're doubling everything that we saw in Janeen's PDF that she shared earlier. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why users purchase a lot more concentrates and extracts from the illicit market still. Because if they can get it for what we pay in excise, like Dan said, they're making $30 a gram in the illicit market per gram of concentrate. We're making 10. So we literally can't compete with them because we pay way too much tax.
So you're saying, Brishna, that in the illicit market, when it comes to concentrates, the price that people are paying is the amount that you are paying at excise alone.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Correct. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Especially for hash, because you take a gram of hash, like let's say 50% THC hash. So now when we look at the markups, there's $5 of excise, but that becomes $8.50 when you get to the markup by the, like, let's say in BC cannabis stores, that $5 will become $8.50, and then the person pays sales tax on the $8.50. So it's pretty much $10 to the consumer is the tax on a gram of hash, and they're like, I can buy a gram of hash for $10 in the black market. So what we're seeing here is that, like, nobody wants to buy bubble hash because the prices don't make sense. You can just, like, it's half the price or less in the black market. And so there's just absolutely no way. And we've made a run at rosin, and we've had to use our advantages. So I will say that, for us, an advantage of the legal market is we can be out in the open, and we have an outdoor farm and a good climate. So, and we're also the inventors of our own technology to extract bubble hash. So we have a good price of production there, but that's not reasonable for most people. But I'll also say that, right now is a great time to be a cannabis consumer and a terrible time to be a cannabis producer. And I don't see any way in the future that the price of cannabis is going to start going back up. It's capitalism. And, a few thousand years ago, or let's say in the Middle Ages, you wanted to buy a nice shirt, the amount of labor that went into that nice shirt is probably like hundreds of times higher than, a shirt you're buying today. And the process of industrialization and capitalism has driven the cost of prices of production of everything ridiculously down. Go see how cheap it is to get, the prices are going up, but relative, you're getting groceries and all these things, they're produced at mass scale, and cannabis is going to be, that's what's happening. And so for us, we were looking at the outdoor side, but I just, like, I think there's a way at the current time for local producers to make a good margin selling high quality flower, because people are willing to go to a local microbrew and pay and get a high quality product. They know the brewer, there's a community there. And I think there's a future for the small craft growers of high quality flower. But I think at larger scale, it's going to turn to farmers and agricultural equipment. And that's just an inevitability of progress. So, you got to realize going into this that the prices are going to continue going down for everybody, and you have to have some advantage. Well, you got to find what your advantage is, whether it's, your skill or your knowledge or your place. And have it there, because I just don't, taxes are going to help us out right now. Like, we're in the middle of this price compression because that's what's going to happen, because we're in a capitalist society and there's a lot of money to invest to make cannabis cheaper. But the government right now is just, putting such a harsh overtone on it. People should be able to have, some businesses should be profitable, not no businesses be profitable. So in the backdrop of having a black market, it's just becoming, so difficult.
So Janeen, I think you had a story, an anecdote you wanted to share that kind of relates to what Brishna was talking about earlier around excise duty, and just tax alone kind of being the cost to compete with the illicit market. Can you share that story right now if you're open to that?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that my boss asked me to do, and it totally blew my mind. It was December, and I was talking to him about, I had some friends and their stores were going to shut down from that loss of revenue in August. It killed so many private retailers in BC. It's their biggest sales month of the year from the strike. And he's like, you know what we're going to do, Janeen? For all the retailers that stayed on DD with us, we're going to take some of our older products, like some of the odds and ends we have, and we're going to pack them up, and we're going to do some ounces, and I want you to register them for the cost of excise only. So even though we paid for the weed, even though we paid for the packaging, even though we paid the staff to package, even though we paid 9 cents for the excise stamp itself, the only cost on this product was excise and BCLDB margin, because even though nobody made any money, we still had to pay BCLDB 15% on the excise tax. Isn't that hilarious, guys? And so the total landed cost per ounce was $32.20, 28 for the excise and 15% BCLDB markup. And we sent these out to the retailers that, had been on direct delivery with us and had continued it after the strike, because a lot of them just dropped off after we bent ourselves into a pretzel to accommodate them in the strike. So we're like, what can we give back? So that's what we gave back. Now, where I saw it really get people excited was in particular, we work with a lot of retailers in the Kelowna area. They've been really great. A lot of them stayed on direct, and they're surrounded by brick and mortar Indigenous stores that don't have to pay the excise tax. And they were so excited because they're selling $30, $40, $50 ounces all day, every day. And then these stores in Kelowna were able to do the same. And they were able to actually attract people in from the illicit market into their store. But in order to do that, we would have to grow the weed for free, sell the weed for free, package the weed for free, even pay the excise stamp and lose the 9 cents on that. So that's the only way we can compete with the illicit market, is to sell products for tax only.
So I think that's a very poignant kind of summarization of this conversation. The way the taxation is structured right now in Canada, including excise, including the provincial markups, and including sales tax, because let's not forget, sales tax also goes to mostly to the province and a bit to the federal government. I actually, don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure it's mostly to the provincial government. I could be wrong about that. So sales tax should be included in this too, because it adds even more. And that that is pretty screwed, that the only way to actually viably move product today is to not value your time, your resources, your energy, all the work you've put into it at all, which is just ludicrous. That's the reality. And I hope that the people from government that are watching this and that will watch this in the coming weeks once it goes online on YouTube that they take this really seriously, because it's like it's a crisis right now, you know. And I've been talking fairly regularly through the BC Craft Economic Development Panel. That's a voice for the BC craft industry that I spearheaded, membership from the Kootenay Cannabis Council, BC Craft Farmers Co-op, Craft Cannabis Association of BC, and the Retail Cannabis Council of BC. We've had our first meeting with a bunch of different ministries in BC, and they were actually pretty surprised in the conversation we had to realize just how much of a crisis it is right now. There's a lot of things that they didn't realize about just how screwed over small scale farmers are in BC. And you know, they've been doing, you know, credit to them, they've been doing a lot of work since to try to like understand more of the realities. So thank you to the BC government for actually listening and making some kind of effort. But of course, making an effort doesn't mean anything if businesses go out of business. So I like what I have been stressing in those conversations. I've been meeting with the Cannabis Secretariat's office, a few other offices in the time since, is that what needs to happen is there needs to be a financial reality where people can actually survive. I'm not talking about thriving, just surviving. Because right now it's not a survivable time for most businesses. And that means changing excise, that means changing the markup. Those are two critical pieces without which there's just like no chance at any kind of viable market. And I think what you just expressed there, Janeen, is a great real world example of just how fucked it is right now. Brishna, you seem like you wanted to say something there, or Daniel.
I was just going to go back, Janine. You had said that, you know, it's the BC Ministry of Finance or the Cannabis Secretariat that is deciding that you need to remit this 15%.
Yes, sir.
And let's also, and these are also the same folks who are collecting 75% of excise tax in BC.
Mm-hmm. Hang on,
So,
one thing. Okay, sorry, I have something after.
Oh no, I just want to know, like when when we pay let's say $10 of excise tax in BC, $2.50 goes to the federal government and $7.50 goes to the BC government. So the BC government is taking the majority of the excise tax, and they're taking this markup.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what I think as BC
and
producers,
some of the sales tax.
And some of the sales tax. Yeah. So all the taxes. And they got their vape tax because there was some time everybody was scared about vape injuries. And we still have this tax on vapes when I think really smoking is probably worse. But anyway, not going to go into the vape tax in this one. But we got lots of taxes in BC. But I think we should go to the BC government and say, you should give a rebate to BC producers for their portion of the excise tax. Now, all of a sudden, everybody wants to open a business in BC. All the BC businesses have an advantage selling their product in BC. Manitoba can do it too because they don't charge their own excise tax. So, you know, don't charge them. But if Ontario producers want to send their products here, they're going to collect the BC excise tax. Now you're protecting BC Bud. We've had Ontario try and steal our business. So the BC government has a very easy way to make, and I tell you, if BC Bud flourished, the tax revenue and the carryover effects in this province are going to be way larger than the excise tax they're collecting. There is not a sound financial argument for the amount of excise tax they're collecting right now, other than them wanting to penalize us or them not being a knowledge of the effects on the industry.
Because all it's doing is ensuring that this industry never grows. I mean,
hang on a second. I just want to talk about the Manitoba model for a second. Here's a little tidbit on what BC is leaving on the table. So if we want to keep that $3.50 and $3.50 and have retailers collect it at retail instead of us lodging it into the DC, let me tell you how that would work. So they would remit that portion of the excise. The federal would have to be loaded in, the 25 cents, but the other 75 cents would be collected at retail. Here's the benefit, guys. BC gets that revenue every month. Right now, BC has to wait till the end of the year, and then CRA has to send it back to them. Wouldn't we rather have that real-time tax income? Even just that change would be huge for producers.
Brishna, what's your thoughts?
They're going to be marked up. You know, the excise won't be marked up in that case too.
Yeah,
that's my point.
No, I agree with everything that's being said here. I think the excise should be collected at their distributor or redistributor level. That sometimes that's the reseller or retailer, then be it. But yeah, if we could get this 75% portion of our excise that BC is getting per gram of anything we sell, it would mean a lot. It would allow growth of small companies. And you're right, Janine. I think it shouldn't have to. The BC province should actually figure this out on their own. That in order to make it more efficient for them to get their cash faster, they should just have it modeled that way. Because you're right, waiting till the year end and for the federal government to close their budget so they can send it to them is a long wait time for them as well.
Brishna,
but hey, seeds is another thing. Seeds, if you gift a seed for free, you still owe the government $1. So we can't even put our seeds for like free. If we do give it for free, which is what Janine sort of explained, just sell it for excise, we would just be paying $1 something for excise, and we wouldn't be making any money.
I think there's a good experiment here, Janine. I think what should have been done is to see if the DD would let you register it for $1 less than excise.
We tried this. That.
They tried this because when we were initially trying to list products with the BCLDB, they just kept telling us like, oh, lower prices, you'll do better, lowest price possible. So I pitched them some hash that was less than the cost of excise. And initially the guy was so stoked. He's like, people are going to freak out at these prices. And we're like, we're going to publicize the fact that we can sell a product and owe more excise than we're actually getting paid. But then BC, I think, figured out what my gambit was, and they said, no, we're not going to take this product. And they didn't really give me a straightforward reason, but I knew they figured out that like we were making negative money. Like you can sell a product and owe the CRA more money than you got paid for that invoice. And so I think trying to do that and see if the BC would accept it, you can publicize that. Obviously, you're not going to sell everything there because you're going to go into business, but we later launched that same product just for a really low price, and it was one of our best ones ever. And that's the publicity, is like, if you want publicity for your brand, then you need to sell it at a super low price, and you need to sell it at a loss originally. And we're like, okay, instead of paying for marketing, we're just going to put our price, like cut out the marketing budget and just sell it for lower. We're like, that's the only way to survive right now. And then, that's the way that we built our brand, was having people, buy what they think is going to be a poor quality product for the price maybe, and then being like, yo, that was pretty good for what I paid. We never went into this being, because like, I know the premium market, everybody wants to be in the premium market. As Janine said, is 3%. The vast majority of people, like, we're all in the cannabis industry and we love being connoisseurs and being like, this smells amazing and it's so nice. But there's the vast majority of people just want to get high for the price they can afford. Okay, they might like the flavor if it's there, and if you can provide it, all the better. But people are struggling, and you need to be able to provide a product at that price. And that comes back to the producer, where it's like, if I want to price my product at a price that people are going to buy it versus the black market, it's so hard to stay in business. So we're just asking.
To that point, Daniel, though, if the excise and the markups weren't as unreasonable as they are right now, if they were actually reasonable and made sense and took into consideration the actual costs and realities of running business, which I think is a necessity for any industry, that you would consider that, and I hope that this changes. If that was the case, then that premium market could grow quite significantly, because you can have premium products at a lower price point that people could afford, and all of a sudden now everybody's happy because people can actually survive and thrive.
100%. I really do believe that. So the government in general had mandates, right? One mandate, tax us, let's get some tax revenue. My neighbors, everybody, they resented us for being growers for years, trust me, because they saw us as losers who didn't pay tax. Well, we did, but my point is, they wanted that tax revenue they've been missing. So what they've done is create such a high tax burden that their second mandate of eliminating the illicit market cannot happen. If anything, they could maybe do a 1 to 2 year relief program on the tax as an initiative to help transition illicit market consumers into legal market consumers. That would actually help them meet both mandates in the long run. But right now, the taxation is working against transitioning in illicit market consumers. And we howl anybody from the legacy market when we see how they estimated illicit production in Canada. They underestimated it by 60%. And then they do these like self-congratulatory press releases saying, oh, we now have 60% of the market. It's like, no, you don't, boys. No, you don't.
Yeah, you got to be careful of all those little things you read, Janine. I've read a few of them recently where it's like declaring certain percentage of the market cap, and then you're looking at the data. You're like, nah, I think you gotta get a better understanding of what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And I would say, the extracts is quite a small portion. Concentrates is a very small portion of the legal market. And we feel that, it's like 90% or more still in the black market for concentrates because of the excise. So, the excise burden's higher, you've got way more in the black market. And this is easy to demonstrate and makes perfect sense. But it just feels like nobody's listening. They're kind of like, you guys will figure it out eventually. Which is probably true, but now you're talking about transitioning out an entire industry, and I think BC needs to wake up right now. There's a lot of politicians in BC that understand that the amount of revenue produced in the province from black market growing, and that's been declining, and our province is doing worse because there isn't illegal cash to pay people and to buy snowmobiles or whatever people spend their money
food.
on. Or food. Well, I mean, people probably finding their money for food, but not as nice ones. They're not going out as much. And so that's a trickle down effect. So if we want to have all of these people who were making really good money, 5-10 years ago, to make good money again, the BC government can act to make a BC industry, and maybe the other provinces will follow, and we'll all can be happier that way. But a lot of people kind of throw up their arms and are like, oh, it's the federal government, like they're never going to listen to us. But no, the BC government, and they've got an office in Victoria. I think we should go there on 420, and everybody should be calling us before then, and we make a presentation and we say, like, here's a way to save BC bud. We used to be known around the world for this. We still kind of are. People outside Canada don't know what's going on here. They still think this is the capital, and sort of like we need to get back and have that industry go forward. I will say that the Minister of Finance in BC right now is the Kootenay West. And that's Catherine Conroy. So I don't know how connected she is with the Nelson MLA, but that's another cannabis area. So
I actually own property in her riding with my partner, who did a 2-year mandatory minimum for 20 lights under Harper era laws, and he couldn't get a security clearance to do his micro there. So I own property in her riding, and since I am in her riding, I'm happy to try to spearhead things with her.
That'd be great. I do know from anecdotal conversations that she has been quite overwhelmed for the first few months of entering a new position she wasn't expecting to enter and kind of learning the ropes. But I'm hoping that now 2-3 months in, however long it's been, that things have chilled out a bit for her. I know that the BC Economic Development Panel is planning to reach out to her with some letters and try to have a conversation with her. One thing I want to kind of speak to what you're talking about, Daniel, that made me a little sad about. I had a conversation with one of the BC ministries a couple weeks ago, and sounds like they're getting a lot of pressure to start being more adversarial with the illicit market. It's like, okay, people haven't transitioned, this hasn't been going on, we got to start cracking down. They're not doing this. I don't want to give anybody the impression that this is happening, just that there's pressure from different parts of government to start that shift. And I kind of made it real clear, until you create a reality where people can actually realistically transition, you guys have failed at your job. The BC government has failed and continues to fail today. Until you create an environment that, like what Daniel's talking about, where people are actually able to transition, what you will find is instantly being over the course of a few years, the illicit market will transition because people don't want to be criminals. They don't want to be 95%, 96%. I forget the exact number, but it's either 95 or 96% of people in the illicit market have zero connection to organized crime. That's data that comes from the Department of Justice Canada. They did a study in 2011 of 500 different underground operations that were caught by the RCMP in different capacities, and across 500 different operations, they found 95% plus had zero ties to organized crime. They were focused on their local communities, and that's kind of what Daniel's talking about when he says that, you know, all these rural communities now have lost significant cash flow and significant ability to survive because of the effects on this industry, because that money is not going to gangsters. That money was going to communities in different rural regions.
That money helped me as a single mother feed my kids. That money, when I was with my husband, it meant that we could register our kids in hockey and that they could get to do things that only upper middle class families can do. Like, that was what we did. We are not criminals. The laws were criminal, in my opinion, not what we did to feed our kids.
So BC government, I know some of you guys are here, and I'm going to send this video when it's on YouTube to a whole bunch of you. Please just create a reality where people can actually survive. That's all. That's just the baseline we're all asking for. We're not asking for anything crazy. Just make, you guys have the power to overnight create a reality where people can survive. It's the power is yours, and we just hope that you choose to do it. Daniel.
But we also, you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. We're all saying this chorus amongst ourselves, and we need to figure out who in the government actually has the power to make that decision, and then politely and respectfully not leave them alone until they make a good decision, because you need to play on the emotion. You know, people don't want to see people struggling, and you've got to tell them that you're struggling. You're going to have to lay off employees. Look at all these people closing down and losing their jobs. I don't want that to happen to my employees. And tell them, explain to them, and they show the human toll of what's going on in just a few small anecdotal examples, and that will push them over to the other side. I mean, Brishna and I were recently, you know, speaking, you know, having polite debate with Health Canada over a matter, and we had to argue the financial matter, that like, this is a risk of putting us all out of business, and people thought that it was hopeless of our argument. But no, you explain to people that if you don't act, we're all going to have terrible consequences, but they need to hear from you individually, and we have to put pressure to be heard, and to put those stories out, and to reach out to your MLAs, especially if they're in the BC NDP, and get that point across, that we're all at a point of losing our businesses, or, you know, cutting off employees, or making really hard decisions, and somebody has the power to change that, and we need to make it a priority, because, you know, cannabis was, like, you know, one of the biggest industries in BC, and now we're just going to let it disappear, and I think it's just confusion and a lack of, you know, cohesiveness. So if we can come together and also give them an actionable plan. We're just screaming that something needs to change, and we shouldn't assume that they're going to be able to figure out how to change it properly right away. And so for us to say, like, hey, like, that's why I'm saying you should be letting producers keep the DD markup, and you should be letting producers keep their portion of the provincial excise tax. And you could overnight change the industry for BC producers and push it on each province. The lower the level of the government, the easier it is to change. So I'm focused on the BC government right now. They're the closest to me. I can get to Victoria within a day.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what I will say, anecdotal experience from the meeting 2-3 weeks ago with a few different BC ministries. None of the ministries there had any idea that your average craft cannabis farmer in the legal market in Canada is not getting paid by their processors. Like, that's just, they had no idea that that was the reality. It shocked them completely. There was just immediate jaws dropped in the room. LCRB, BCLDB, Cannabis Secretariat's office, Ministry of Ag, just nobody had any idea. And that really changed things. Like, you could feel the shift in the room, and like the desire to like actually like figure that out. And, you know, I've been hearing of countless farmers getting calls from the government in the past few weeks to like ask about that, understand that situation. Like, that emotional understanding that people are going out of business because of the policies made them really care, and made them kind of actually start trying in a different way that I can't speak to, like, because it's kind of, there's like a black box there, like there's not a lot of transparency around what actually happened, so I don't know the before and the after, but I did see the shift of once they realized how severe of a problem it was, things went into overdrive, and I'm thankful.
And that would have to change federally, Sammy. So that's a federal change we would be requesting. It's mainly a result of what happened with the changes that came in 2019 in May. When the license classes got split, it made all of us dependent on people who had sales licenses and processing licenses. And also going back to Janeen's point, her partner not being able to get a security clearance, for instance. The security clearance process is very costly. Not just in terms of money, like the fee order we pay, but in the time it takes us to follow up with Health Canada to make sure they process one application. And the security requirements for facilities, I feel like, are way overboard. They're not necessary. If you're a business and you have the ability to have standardized processes yourself and procedures and run and get product that are coming out meeting your specifications, there should be no need for security footage as much as we're recording. It's too costly. It's too time consuming.
And I think.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Just like, this is on the federal level again, it's maybe a bit of a tangent, but we have to look like, what is the point of excise tax? And that was to offset the dangers that cannabis can have. And I'm not going to say cannabis has no dangers, but I think it's well accepted that those dangers are far less than alcohol. And for alcohol, the excise tax on a can of beer is about like 10 cents, maybe 20 cents. So let's say you got a really cheap beer and it's like $2 a can, and you're paying, 10% of that is excise tax. But for a lot of it, maybe it's $4 a can, and it's like 5% of that retail price is excise tax. Well, for cannabis, you're buying a $3 gram of cannabis, and 33% of that was excise tax. And then there's other markups and everything else dropped in there. So when we look at it as alcohol, that immediately says like, hey, like this is why are we being taxed more than something that we know is more harmful? So that's like a rationale, but we can't expect the government to be rational, but we can expect that the easier a solution we provide, the faster the solution can be implemented. And Marcus Richardson, Bubbleman, said something that was really good on the federal level. There's one word that needs to be changed, and that is, in the excise tax is 10% or $1, whichever is more. And you just need to change it 10% or $1, whichever is less. That would completely fix the industry overnight if you change that one word from more to less. Or, but the federal government might be too hard to reach. So I'm focusing provincial first. But, we spoke to the federal director of the excise tax program at the LIFT conference in Vancouver. I got to speak to him. And I told him, like, you're making producers count their cannabis seeds. And he's like, no, you don't have to count your seeds. I'm like, yes, you ask us every month how many seeds are in our inventory. Health Canada makes us report in kilograms, but you guys make us report the number of seeds. And he's like, oh, yeah, I guess we do that. And I'm like, do you know what cannabis seeds are called colloquially in the industry? He's like, no, they're called beans. So you, as the CRA, have asked every cannabis company to count their beans. We've all become bean counters for the CRA, and he broke out laughing. He finally understood the absurdity of the situation, being an accountant and all. But yes, they're like, count your beans, guys, because we're going to come count them for you. So not only do we pay excise tax, but we have a ridiculous reporting burden. The processors aren't in a good place as well. They're going out of business. They can't afford all the costs that are imposed on them in a regulatory way and in the excise tax way. So, and at the end, the farmers are the last ones to get paid. So, there's not enough money. You don't get paid for your product. We're experiencing that right now. So, it's tough times. And yeah.
One really quick thing that a lot of people don't understand that I want to touch on is, even when we sell to the province, it's not sold. They can
return,
reduce your price or you're getting an RTV, they can
What is
say
RTV? Return to vendor?
return to vendor, and they have the right to return it at any time. So if you pay a cultivator on a toll processing contract out in 30 days on the PO, and then the weed was overpriced for the quality, and then the province RTVs it to you, you're now like going out of business. And a lot of cultivators thought their weed was worth a lot more than I guess the market thought it was worth, and it didn't sell through. And as a result, you know, that is something that does cause a lot of friction between processors and their clients.
Yeah, and the provinces essentially, if they owe you funds, they just subtract it. So when you have an RTV, they owe you 100K. Your RTV was to say 80K, then they'll just pay you to 20K. They don't care. Same thing on the excise. You pay the government or the provinces before you can actually even pay your staff.
So right now we have a bunch of products. We had our best sales month ever in November, and we haven't seen any of those sales because our processor had an RTV from another partner, and they never got paid by the provinces for the product that we sold. And we've been running about a 98% sell through. That's the other thing about pricing your products low, is you don't have to pay for RTVs. We're like, we can't afford RTVs, we can't afford marketing. We have to price our product at a price that is going to sell out right away. And that's the best strategy that I recommend to people right now. But then we sell out our product, and the processor's other partner gets an RTV, and now there's no money because the provinces is like, we're not paying you for this, you got an RTV. And then our processor can't get money back from their other partner, and we get nothing. So
yeah, so these are all
That's
federal
fucked.
changes. These are federal changes that need to come into licensing.
Well, that's not a
It's-
federal thing. That's the BCLDB or whatever provincial
well,
distribution board it was
the
sold
federal
to.
government has given them the monopoly, right? So there has to be some changes on the cannabis regs to allow that to happen, Sammy.
Well, I know there's somebody. Was this a BCLDB LTV, Daniel, that you're talking about, or
No, it's an OCS.
BC is the only province we're getting money from. It's other provinces that have stricter requirements on those products. And you know, our products, because we're based in BC, they sell through really well, and we've done and our processor hasn't had any RTVs there. So we've been getting paid for our products sold in BC, but our products sold in Alberta and Ontario got offset by other RTVs. Our processor never got paid. They don't have money. They're actually in receivership right now. Like, we don't know if we'll ever get paid. We're hoping that the buyer is going to pay us. They've told us they want to, but the industry's fucked right now. So that's the kind of situation that we're looking at.
Do the provincial distribution boards know? Have you expressed to them, hey, just so you guys know, like, this is a situation, like, you're screwing us over. We're now in danger of going out of business because of this decision to this processor, where we were just using their sales amendment. That's all it was.
So a good solution for this, like, we ran into this with a micro that we helped get to market after they had their previous processor basically screw them out of like almost $1 million because of a CRA debt that they deferred. And so we helped them get to market. And at that time, we tried to assign the payable to them. And we were like, okay, you're just doing a route to market with us. We're just like charging a small amount to cover the overhead of, like, you know, using the recall insurance and all that. So can we assign the payable to them? We weren't allowed to do that. BCLD assigned the payable.
So the payable had to be to you guys.
To us. Yeah.
The sales license, the federal sales license holder.
So they wouldn't allow us to sign a legal contract that we were okay with them paying these other people. So what we ended up doing was opening a joint account, just because we really wanted them to know, like, we're here for you.
Daniel and Brishna, going back to the story that Daniel shared, do the provincial, Ontario, Alberta, whichever it was, are they even aware of how
they've told us they don't want to talk to us because we're not registered with the sales license. They don't want to talk to the co-packers. They're like, you're not our problem. So then we're telling them, but if your product doesn't sell, it's an RTV. So it's my job to make sure that the provincial retailer's product will sell, but they don't even want to talk to me because I don't have the right license. So, and we told them, like, OCS, like, you're ordering product, like, right now can you please just order once a month instead of weekly, because we can't afford to send out orders this way, and our product's not working. And the response was, a computer makes the ordering decision. I can't do anything. And we went to our category manager, and she's trying to help us. But the general view is just sort of like, no, you're like, this is the way we do business. And so, I told the OCS they're ordering like they want to put us out of business. Like we can't, like it's like predatory ordering. Like, why wouldn't you just order once a month? You're creating more work for yourself and more work for me because you only want to stock 1 week's worth of product. And
not to mention
just,
the environmental impact of like shipping from BC to Ontario,
and then back and then back and forth and then back and forth. It's ridiculous because now standard cultivators outdoors, I got a letter that I'm going to be inspected by the BC environmental regulatory body. So I'm like, why don't you go inspect someone else that could really use this inspection and tax dollar in your time? Because the packaging and the cost of shipping is very high environmental impact. So if we send a pallet there and it comes back, it's also very costly, which means you might not make any money on a product at all.
Yeah, and to meet OCS's deadlines and data docking and get the delivery, especially on flow through, you have to air freight. Guys, the environmental impact, like we've got all these climate initiatives. It's just so funny because all their policies literally counteract each other. It's kind of funny. Like it's almost comedy.
It's comedy if we were like watching this instead of living this. Okay, guys.
I think I'm all for Daniel. If you want to go to Victoria for 420, I had to be in Kelowna for the BC Cannabis Summit. I'm sure we can get a whole bunch of people to show up. Get us an appointment. We could all go there and try to express our voices. I think that's a great idea.
I think the first step is reaching out directly and having a respectful and direct conversation with the government about the effect it's having. And if they're not listening, then you march on them and you make it a more public issue. But I do believe that they will respond to your direct contact and be respectful. Don't yell at them because this is a problem. Tell them the problems you're having and that you're trying to help them find a solution for everyone else. That's the first step. And, if that doesn't work in the next month, then we should be having a 420 march to the Ministry of Finance, or, hopefully at that time we're celebrating a change they can announce. But, that's the kind of situation we're in. So I think it's really important that, we keep an open conversation on this. I know there's been the kind of Stand for Craft movement and that, but I think, as BC producers right now, we just have to look at what are changes that can be made at every level of government. And because most of the excise tax money is going to the BC government, I feel like right now they're the best place to go. They're the closest to home, and I think they're going to be the easiest to convince in the short term. The federal is going to be slower to move. They've got a lot more issues, and I think cannabis has been such a big part of BC's economy for a longer time that we can make a really good case that this is important for our province and our province's future. Of course, it's important for people everywhere, but we have a special history here that we need to preserve.
Guys, we're 24 minutes over time here. So
sorry.
That's okay. It's been a fascinating discussion, but I do want to just go around and give each of you guys an opportunity to share whatever final thoughts you think are relevant that you want to be recorded forever in this video that will be uploaded to YouTube here. Anybody feel like jumping in first?
I wish the federal expert panel setup would invite more people from the industry. So if there's anyone here from the federal government, I highly suggest you guys look into someone who has been in the legal cannabis industry for a long time and who knows the ins and outs in the whole process of whether it's registering a product from the federal government all the way to distribution, because none of you on the panel, excuse my disrespect, have the experience I see necessary to evaluate the Cannabis Act.
I don't think that's disrespectful if you're just stating facts.
Well, they might be. I don't know about their personal lives. Some of them are professors and clinical psychologists, so it needs to be someone who's actually familiar with the whole process and is familiar with the Act really well.
I would echo that. One thing that we haven't touched on here at all is that there's excise on medical patients. And that's just a huge travesty to begin with. And the rationale the government gave was, and I think they understood the effect of markup on the excise more back then, because they're like, if we don't charge excise tax for medical patients, everybody's going to use the medical program because it's going to be cheaper. And that's another back to like the authoritarianness of the government. They're more worried about the potential like avoidance of tax issues than the affordability of medicine for patients. So on top of industry people on the panel review for Health Canada, I really think that medical advocacy or patients need to be there as well. They've taken a very like clinical psychologist researcher view. We'll have some clinical patients who've been using medical cannabis and have their viewpoint in there as well. So I think on the federal level, that the medical access also needs to be really looked at, because there shouldn't be any excise for medical patients. And that's a whole nother bag of worms we can get into.
And just on that note there, to kind of qualify some of what Daniel's saying, cannabis is the only medicine in Canada that has tax, period.
But no, it's okay, but it's just definitions. A medicine is something that's been accepted by the medical community. Cannabis is not a medicine because it's not accepted for the medical community.
And the technical reason why cannabis can be taxed with excise duty and all that is because when you get a prescription for cannabis, it's not actually called a prescription. It's called a medical document. If it was called a prescription, the excise program would be illegal to be charged for medical cannabis. That's the technicality that allows this to actually happen. But it's the only thing that you can be prescribed by a doctor with a prescription that's not called a prescription, and then you get taxed because of that technicality.
There's a local doctor actually along the Sea to Sky that got a notice from Health Canada's Office of Medical Cannabis stating that he's prescribed too many patients high dose per gram. And I'm one of his patients. I have been for the past few years, and he actually was really surprised. He's like, I can't believe they're going back against evidence that I can find in literature. And he's been a physician in the Sea to Sky for over 40 years. The Canadian Medical Association is really pushing for it not to be included as a medicine.
It's heinous. Yeah. I guess what I would like to say is, I love our illicit cannabis community. Okay. I was part of it for years. They're my people. I don't want any enforcement. That isn't going to change the tide. You're going to be playing whack-a-mole. So if the government is listening and you're thinking of increased enforcement, we used to have the cops come through our room at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, and we would have it replanted by Wednesday at 3 p.m. So you're not going to win with enforcement. How you're going to win is by making legal products affordable and education campaigns to reduce stigma for our industry overall. There has been no efforts to reduce stigma in our industry by the government. So if we want to have tax revenue in the future, we need to reduce it right now so that we can have a little bit of relief, not forever, but at least right now, to transition consumers into the legal market, because right now we have not won. We are not winning.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is that in doing that, yes, short-term taxes decrease, long-term they go up orders of magnitude. So it's in the government's best interest to support this industry in its nascent phase. And that's the thing with every new industry, there's a lot of support in the nascent phase to allow it to flourish. And then once it's flourishing, then kind of things shift, and there's more and more that's taken back from the government as kind of a return on their investment. And that hasn't happened in cannabis. And so I really hope to see that change. I think that's a great note to end on there. Guys, thank you so much for being here today. Our audience, thank you for interacting. We had one question from Earl that I'm not even going to about who's organizing the Victoria 420 protest meetup. I'm not going to get into that, though, because Daniel did answer his thoughts on that. What I will say, that Brishna, I'll be at the BC Cannabis Summit too. There's going to be a lot of people there. I feel like if things haven't changed by that point, it might make sense organizing a convoy to Victoria from the Cannabis Summit. I feel like that could be like a good use of time, but we can discuss that in a
Yeah,
later
everybody
time.
bring your tents and your sleeping bags. We're going to go to that beautiful park that's right by the Parliament.
I really appreciate you guys being here. It's wonderful to have really opinionated people come by and share their opinions. That's what makes this Statecraft thing possible. And on that note, next time we will have a very opinionated person also joining us. Stephen Conville, I think is his last name, from Chronic Relief. They are a standard craft-oriented, craft-focused producer out in Ontario. Stephen moderated a panel that I was on at Lyft, and we were the two people on the panel who had very who were willing to be very real about the bullshit that the industry is facing. So ended up talking to him quite a bit, did a little interview on the show floor. We had a little booth set up to do live interviews. We got into it for 17 minutes, and he was very opinionated and happy to share his very opinionated opinions. And so I'm excited to kind of get into that with him in a longer format thing not next week, in 2 weeks. Daniel, Brishna, Janeen, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
For anybody who's watching this on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. We make one of these every 2 weeks, and just want to be real about the industry and the bullshit that we're all facing. This is meant as like an educational opportunity for people in the industry, people considering entering the legal market, and for government. And we hope that this can actually result in some of the change that we're talking about here, because at this point, it's an existential crisis. See you guys later.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Au revoir.
Bye.